When most of us hear the Great Commission, we think of that one powerful command from Jesus, right? But what if it's so much more than that? What if it's the actual, honest-to-goodness blueprint for one of the most action-packed books in the entire Bible, the book of Acts? We're going to see how this one mandate laid out the whole plan, the structure, the power, and the strategy that kicked off the entire early church.
And it all starts right here. Before Jesus gives a single command, he makes this just staggering declaration. Look, this isn't a suggestion, it's not a friendly tip. It's a statement of absolute cosmic authority. The resurrected King of the universe is literally laying the legal and spiritual foundation for everything that's about to happen, the entire mission, the whole thing. It's built on this one single, non-negotiable fact. He is in charge.
Okay, so if that's the authority powering the whole thing, what was the actual plan? How did Jesus expect this world-changing message to actually spread? And that question right there is where we pivot from the why of the mission to the how. And what we find is a divine strategy that's, well, both incredibly simple and seriously profound. So this blueprint, it's really built on two essential non-negotiable parts. First, you've got Christ's unshakable authority, we just talked about that. And second, you have a power source that would totally transform the messengers themselves. And that power source? The Holy Spirit. Seriously, without both of those, the whole plan would have been dead in the water. Impossible.
Let's be real for a second. The disciples, they weren't some kind of elite special forces team, not at all. These were fishermen, tax collectors, guys who were often pretty timid and full of doubt. The mission to take this message to the entire world, that was so far beyond what they could do on their own. They needed something else, a radical transformation, a power source from outside themselves.
And that power, it actually has a name. In Acts chapter 1, Jesus promises them they're going to receive dunamis when the Holy Spirit comes. Now, this isn't just, regular strength or a bit of courage. The Greek word dunamis, sound familiar? It's where we get our word dynamite. We're talking explosive, supernatural, miracle-working power. This was the game changer. This is what would turn those timid disciples into absolutely fearless witnesses.
And wow, was the impact immediate. At Pentecost, that promise becomes reality. The Holy Spirit shows up, and Peter, the same guy who just a little while ago denied he even knew Jesus, he stands up and preaches. And the result? 3,000 people believe. Just like that. That wasn't Peter being a great speaker, no way. That was the blueprint's power source kicking into high gear, proving itself on day one.
All right, so the mission has its authority, and it has its power source. Check and check. Now let's get into the strategy. See, the blueprint wasn't just about what to do, it was super specific about how and where to do it. It laid out this clear strategic geographical plan that we see unfold perfectly all through the book of Acts.
Jesus lays the whole thing out in Acts 1:8, and it works just like a ripple in a pond. It starts right at the center, in Jerusalem. That's the spark that ignites the whole movement. Then the ripples expand outward, to the nearby regions of Judea and Samaria. And this forces the disciples to start crossing these huge cultural and ethnic barriers that had been there for centuries. And finally, the mission goes global, with the ripples pushing out to the very ends of the known world.
And here's what's so important. As this mission spread out across the map, the core message itself never, ever changed. This wasn't some vague philosophy they were sharing, it was a very specific proclamation. It was all about the life, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. It was a message that ticked all the boxes, fulfilling ancient prophecies, a message that offered forgiveness just through faith, and one that just radically smashed down the walls that separated people.
Now you'd think a message this powerful, this life-changing, that everyone would just welcome it with open arms, right? But the blueprint actually planned for a paradox. It anticipated that the very same message, bringing salvation and joy to some, would also provoke intense, even violent hostility from others.
So on the one hand, the success was just undeniable. It wasn't just those first few converts at Pentecost. Acts tells us thousands and thousands more joined the church. Whole communities were being transformed, grabbing onto this message of hope with just incredible joy. The acceptance was huge, and it was explosive. But then there's the other side of the coin. For preaching that exact same message of hope, the apostles were arrested. They were dragged before councils, publicly beaten, and threatened with death. And this wasn't some one-off thing. It was their constant reality. The very same words that brought life to some people brought violent opposition from others.
And this reveals something so critical about the blueprint. Opposition wasn't a sign that they were failing. It was actually an expected, built-in part of the mission. Jesus himself had told them this was going to happen. So for the early church, persecution wasn't a setback, it was almost like a confirmation that they were on the right track.
Okay, so this brings us to a really critical point. The book of Acts, it doesn't really have an ending. Think about it. Paul is under house arrest in Rome, he's preaching freely, and then the book just stops. It just ends. Why? Because the blueprint is still active. The mission is still going.
When you look at a timeline like this, you realize we are part of a living, breathing history. The blueprint was given, right? The message made it all the way to the heart of the Roman Empire, but the story didn't stop there. Not even close. It's continued for 2,000 years, passed down from one generation to the next, which brings the story right to our doorstep, right to us. And that leaves us with a pretty big question. What's our role in all this?
What this all means is that the Great Commission isn't some dusty old document sitting in a museum somewhere. It's a living directive. It's supposed to be a lifestyle, something that shapes how we see our neighbors, our jobs, our entire world. And you know, when you really get it, you realize it's not some heavy burden. It's a profound privilege to get to be part of God's amazing, redemptive plan for the world.
So here we are. The blueprint is clear. The authority behind it is absolute, and the power to get it done is available. The question it asks every single generation, including ours, is really simple. What will you build?